The Engineer Cafe, speaking with Stephen, who's been studying for, how long have you been studying?
I've been studying for about 7 months plus now. So I left my job about 7 months ago, kind of concentrate studying on programming, things like that. But I had a little bit of experience before that, kind of doing various programming things.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get into that today. You've been studying here and you've gone from relative beginner to now finding a job and getting a job. A credit to all your hard work. So I just want to ask a bunch of questions about how you did it, what you did, things that were easy, difficult. So before we get into that, what did you actually do before you were becoming a software engineer?
So before becoming a software engineer, I worked in teaching and translation for a long time. And so I've lived in Japan for a long time.
Right.
After I graduated from university, I came here on a study abroad program. Then I've lived for the past 10 years in Japan, mostly teaching, also doing some translation, kind of English to Japanese and Japanese to English. I got the Japanese language proficiency test N1 a couple of years ago. That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Of course, there's always more to learn. There's always more to do. I think there's still a little bit of a gap between me and a native speaker, but yeah, I'd say I'm fairly high up.
Yeah, and I would say your level is pretty high relative to many people. So obviously that's useful for looking for work as well. So you started about 6-7 months ago. Right at the beginning, what did you find most useful? What was the most useful resources, the best ways to study? Tell us about that.
So to begin with, I think there are a lot of, when making something, there's a lot of kind of hurdles when it comes to setting things up, to getting your environment sorted, to getting the right things in the right place, so you can just start coding. And so I think one of the places I first started was Codecademy. It kind of has like a shell you can work in. It has like a lot of different courses, a lot of different things. Some of it's kind of paid for content, some of it you have to pay for, but there's a lot of free stuff there as well. And so if you go and check out the free stuff, you can just get coding within about 5 or 10 minutes.
Right.
You can just make an account, it's free to kind of get set up. And you can get coding, doing something, kind of playing around with variables and stuff fairly quickly.
Right.
Another one, one of the books I used was Learning Python the Hard Way. And so that's kind of a very, very popular book. It's available as an ebook now as well, I think. And so, that it goes from very, very simple stuff, just like printing out variables and things like that, to a lot more difficult stuff. And if you don't have the environment on your machine to do that straight away, there are online environments that you can use. I think you recommended me one.
There's many, I think, online environments. One that I often recommend for people just starting is
Replit, that was the one.
So, and this is really straightforward. You can just make an account like you would on any website, and then start writing code in here. Many languages. I didn't know they had a mobile app. That's pretty cool.
Wow, that's cool.
Many languages, lots of useful stuff. And I think you're totally right. When you're first starting, there are so many things to learn. It can be quite overwhelming. I recommend just pick one thing, pick one language, one textbook, one course, follow it, and go from start to finish. So it's very easy to pick out many things and try and do them all. But just pick one. And tools like this, I think, are good when you first start.
Definitely.
Eventually, you're definitely going to want to set things up locally and do things a kind of more proper way. But until then, try these tools out. I think it's a really easy way to get going.
Yeah, I think there's another website, the Odin Project, which starts you off going through how to set up your environment. I think that has a little bit on how to get started with the VS Code or Visual Studio Code, and how to set that up, how to get started with that. And I think that's also a good place to start. I think if you just want to get in, you want to make something, you want to see if something's for you, then I think things like Replit's a really good tool, and Codecademy is really good just to get you coding from 5 minutes, 10 minutes after you want to.
Right.
But Odin Project has a good startup thing where it goes through these are the programs you need to start making stuff on your computer. This is how you set them up. This is what this does. And so if you want to jump straight in on your own machine, or if you've been programming on maybe another platform like Replit for a little bit, and you want to move to working on your own machine now, then I think that has a good way of going through it.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a great resource. I just want to introduce one more resource, which is the CS50. which is an online, it's in Japanese as well.
Oh, yes.
But it's like an introduction to computer science. And now programming and computer science, not quite the same thing, but obviously very connected. And really, I think like this could be a good supplement. If you're enjoying doing some of the programming, you want to learn a bit more kind of theoretical stuff, learning a bit more computer science might be useful. Did you do any specific computer science study?
And so I did a little bit back at university. This was a very long time ago. We're talking about 10, 12 years ago now. And so a little bit back then, but kind of very minimal. And so this kind of computer science course, the Harvard one, is one that I had a look at.
Yeah.
It's very, very long, very, very thorough. I haven't worked my way all the way through it yet. But yeah, it's amazing to think that these courses are available online. And kind of lots of courses. I think YouTube is another good source of this. This one is on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
And I think Free Code Camp has a lot of ones as well. It's kind of really long, very in-depth courses about kind of all sorts of aspects of programming.
Yeah.
So YouTube another great resource for whatever you kind of want to find.
Yeah, I think Free Code Camp is another really nice resource. So yeah, we've given you about 6-7 resources there. Pick one, pick something focused, and jump in. So that's how you got started, you got going. Programming is fun, but it's not always easy. What did you do when you got stuck?
And so kind of when I got stuck, I guess the first thing I'd do is I'd kind of, to begin with, I'd kind of just try to look through my code and see if I could solve it myself. But then kind of when you get working on more difficult problems, more complicated things that you want to build, it's not always easy to tell just by having a look at your code as a beginner, kind of what's right and what's wrong. And so thankfully there are lots and lots of resources online. I think Stack Overflow is one of them. I think you can either go to Stack Overflow and search there, or you can search something via Google, and usually directly to Stack Overflow, where thankfully lots of people have kind of posted questions and answers, hopefully about something that's similar to kind of what you've been encountering. And so if there is a post there, you can read it, you can see people's replies, you can see which ones have worked, which ones maybe haven't worked so much. And if there isn't a question about what you want to know about, you can always make a thread or make a post, and hopefully someone will come and help you and answer that for you. And so Stack Overflow is a really, really good resource for kind of getting specific answers to specific questions. Yeah. For more broad things, I think kind of design docs, the kind of documentation is a really, really good place to go. Especially if you're kind of using maybe like a new package or a new framework that perhaps you're not fully acquainted with yet. And so, for example, when I was learning Django, kind of a Python web framework, a lot of the time when I would get stuck, I'd go to the Django documentation. And so there's a whole lot of documentation there, from kind of tutorials teaching you how to do the basic things, or kind of working through more advanced concepts, to kind of just a lot of just, information about kind of how to use various parts of the framework.
Yeah.
And so documentation is another really, really good resource. And it's something you'll be using more and more as your programming gets kind of a lot more complex and a lot more unique. The more unique the problems you have to solve, the kind of more you'd have to rely on documentation, and the less you'll be able to rely on kind of people already having done what you want to do and being able to use things like Stack Overflow. So it's always good to get familiar with using documentation and looking at things up there.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, because I think reading the official docs is often a great way to get information. Another thing that people sometimes forget is really read those error messages. Often the error message is really telling you what's wrong, and use that, find out what's wrong, fix it. Sometimes people just see like 6-7 red lines and they go, "Oh, it's an error. Guess I could throw this away and start again." It's like, read the error messages. Did you have any people you could like ask for help, ask questions, or other like resources like that?
So yeah, kind of there are people at an engineering cafe. I guess you are one of those people, kind of very willing to help, kind of give you lots of different advice about all sorts of different things. Yeah. Of course, but yeah, you were a very good large help for a lot of different times, kind of whether it came to kind of, where to start, kind of you recommended me some books and things like that, or kind of specific problems as well. Kind of when we were doing things about Flask, we kind of set up that kind of basic site very quickly. And so yeah, kind of Engineering Cafe has kind of some people around and about who you can ask about things. I know some of the people upstairs I've kind of asked about like things like Flask as well, and they've been helpful on that too. And so yeah, the Engineering Cafe has a lot of people around who you can ask. It has a lot of books as well about various different things. And so yeah, that's been really, really useful.
Yeah. we're a free resource for people in Fukuoka to come and learn about programming and ask questions. And generally speaking, there's at least one technical person in the Engineer Cafe all the time. So you're very welcome for people to like come here and what's this bug? How do I fix this? Come ask tricky questions. We love it. We can't guarantee we can fix it, but that's a very useful resource. And it's also, sometimes people call it rubber ducking. Have you heard the phrase rubber ducking?
I haven't heard that. What's that?
Basically, it's like when you ask a question to another person, you have to very clearly explain it in your mind to yourself. So the act of asking a question to another person will often kind of solve the problem for you because you realize what you were doing wrong. So the joke is that you could ask your coworker, you could ask your teacher, but you could just ask a rubber duck and it'd be just as good.
Right. I see.
So like trying to just explain your problem to someone, really, really helpful. And one more thing I'd add, recently I've been using a lot of Discord communities.
Right.
And for example, if I'm trying out a new language or a new framework, they often have a Discord community that's quite active. And you go in there and you can speak directly to people who are very experienced with it. And maybe they're working on the project themselves. You get very quick answers. And I found Discord to be very helpful recently. Yeah. So I've got a list of slightly cheesy questions, but I wrote them. Can you tell us about any small victories you had? I don't know what I meant.
Any small victories?
Like, what were your kind of like fun moments, successful moments as you were studying?
I had a lot of small victories. Kind of one of the first things I made was like a kind of a music player. I listened to a lot of kind of video game music when I'm doing my programming. I wanted a music player that could kind of loop that effectively. Kind of you could just a start point and an end point, and you kind of loop in between for a bit. And so when I was adding functions to that, kind of there were a lot of small victories there. Kind of getting the initial thing done, kind of took a bit of time, but wasn't amazingly difficult. Then kind of going off track a bit and kind of adding a couple of unique functions to that. Kind of each time kind of I got one of those working, it felt like a really nice short small victory. And so it's a really, really good way to kind of motivate yourself, really. If you're kind of just looking at the end of a project and you've kind of got one big thing to do, then it can be easy to kind of become demotivated as you work towards that. But kind of breaking it up into parts where you can kind of, have these small victories that keep you motivated, kind of, I implemented this today, or I got these two functions done today. I think that's really, really good at kind of helping you maintain motivation kind of through those difficult times.
Yeah, I think. Okay. I think.
It's a breakfast bar.
Oh, nice. I think if you, if you go past the sort of beginner stage, first off you're just running code, trying to work out simple stuff, lines like little functions, and then after that, you really need some kind of bigger project to, get your teeth into and really kind of learn how more complicated bits of software work. And I think it's so true, like having that little extra feature you can add, a little extra thing you can do is very motivating because you've always got a little bit of something you can work on. Because it's very easy to hit a wall with programming. I have done many times, like you've got a problem, you don't know how to solve it, it's really frustrating, you could spend hours on it, and that's really annoying and really demotivating. So it can be nice to be able to like, okay, I'm really stuck on this, I'm just going to try something a little bit different.
Definitely.
I'm going to just sort of add a different feature, come back to this later. Because just banging your head against a brick wall of something that's not quite right, really frustrating. So try and watch out for that. Let's move on then. So after you studied a bunch, and you did, I saw you coming here and I saw you studying a lot. You studied really hard. At the end of that kind of process, you started applying to jobs. So can you tell us a bit about like how you found jobs, how you applied to them, anything you think you did well or not so well, or anything else you recommend?
And so my main kind of job finding process, I guess, first of all, kind of was looking for jobs online via recruitment sites. And I had kind of a very mixed response with that. I think recruitment sites, especially in Japan, tend to kind of focus a lot more towards Japanese people, especially those who previous experience kind of working kind of in like a, say, in a very corporate environment in Japan. And so I think that there are opportunities there. I think that it's definitely quite difficult, especially if you're from like a non-standard background, to kind of go into those sites.
Yeah.
I've had kind of more success either kind of looking for jobs kind of through acquaintances, or I think Wantedly was one of the sites. It's kind of like a recruitment site, but it's more of a kind of recruitment / social networking site, social media site, I guess, for companies that are hiring. And so that was quite useful. There are quite a couple of companies I found on there which were willing to, of course, kind of look for kind of non-standard candidates from people who are mid-career who have less experience or things like that. And so kind of looking through there was quite a good source of kind of looking for jobs as well. Another one, there are two kind of more specifically for kind of people, foreigners in Japan. There's Tokyo Dev and Japan Dev, and I know that you're kind of very familiar with these. And these have kind of software development jobs, kind of more suited to kind of people, to foreigners kind of working in Japan. And so there's usually some quite good postings on there for all different sorts of engineers. And so if you kind of look on there, there's probably some good faces, there's some good opportunities there as well.
Yeah, I definitely think, speaking to people who are non-Japanese people in Japan, the job market is a bit different than maybe a standard Japanese software engineer. So yeah, I think you're exactly right in the fact that there are these standard kind of Japanese software jobs. Some of them are okay, some of them not so good, and they're very, big Japanese companies with certain cultural expectations of the company culture. But there's also more and more English-speaking, sort of they call gaishikei, kind of foreign-owned companies or foreign-related companies, and there's some really interesting opportunities there. And those two sites you mentioned with Tokyo Dev and Japan Dev can be a really great resource for that. So if you're looking for that kind of job, definitely, yeah. And I have to agree with what you said about acquaintances, people you know. Network is always good as well. Like, in the past, I've got lots of work and lots of jobs from that kind of introduction and things like that. And this air conditioner is totally broken.
It's on downward, so I think it's heating the place up. I can feel like a hot stream of air coming in.
Every time. There we go. It's broken. Yeah.
Oh well, it's fine.
It doesn't. I think it's on.
Got like a cool breeze here, warm breeze here.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Oh. I think it might be broken actually.
It is broken.
It's not. Oh, there we go.
It's something. I think it's something wrong with the controller.
Oh no, I think it's off. So.
Okay, well we'll see.
Yeah, we'll deal with that later.
Engineer Cafe, can't get the tag. So what about preparing like a CV or resume, doing the actual application?
So if I'm preparing a CV, that kind of took me quite a lot of time, especially applying to Japanese companies. And having to do that in Japanese kind of took quite a while as well. There are resources online, I think, for kind of doing that and kind of helping through that process. I think really like having acquaintances or friends or kind of teachers who can help you through that kind of process in Japanese is kind of really beneficial. Kind of I know kind of I'm studying Japanese with the help of two teachers at the moment, and kind of running ideas past them, kind of to see what sounds right and kind of see what sounds maybe a bit off, and kind of just kind of bouncing ideas off them and kind of having them check over things would be really, really useful. So I know there are people here at the Engineering Cafe who kind of do those kind of things, like career meetings, both in English and in Japanese. Yeah. And so you can always find someone kind of in the language that you want to kind of look over a CV for you, or to kind of maybe check a covering letter or something like that. And so, kind of having someone look over those documents is definitely really, really useful. And so, also kind of preparing things like a portfolio, I think, is very, very helpful. And so one of the things kind of when you get a bit more creative with programming is a good thing to do is to kind of start building projects. And so you don't have to be really, really experienced. You can just be learning and be kind of at a beginner level, but you can still build out some really interesting projects and some really useful things that maybe just you want to have or you want to make. And so kind of doing that and then being able to kind of host that online. There are lots of places where you can host that online for free. Like GitHub Page is one of those places. I think Heroku, is still doing free hosting. I'm not quite sure. That might be changing soon. But Heroku and there are other, services where you can host things online as well. And so making some projects, putting them online, maybe making a little page kind of about yourself is another way to kind of market yourself to potential employees.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the portfolio can be really helpful because not only can it be great for those job applications and showing you're creating stuff, it's a great networking opportunity as well. You know, you meet new people, you show them portfolios straight away, in a way that you wouldn't really hand someone your resume or CV if you hang out at an event. But you can show them, I worked on something like this, and it starts a conversation.
Yeah.
And you can practice your skills, practice any kind of web-related skills for sure. It's just really useful. Let's move on about the interviews then. So, did you have any kind of tough interview questions, difficult stuff? What kind of things did they ask you?
And so a lot of questions about kind of things that I'd done or things that I'd made, kind of talking about projects I've done or projects I've made, or about things I'd studied kind of during my 6-7 months studying programming. And so kind of that was the first kind of set of questions, kind of technical things. I didn't get so many, I guess it depends on the company you go to, but I didn't get so many algorithmic questions where you kind of have to make algorithms or kind of solve a kind of coding puzzle. I know some companies, particularly kind of more kind of perhaps maybe higher level kind of foreign companies tend to use those kind of interview techniques, but they're not something that I encountered. But be wary of those as well, because you may encounter them for some companies. Also, take-home exercises is something that I encountered, where you're kind of given a task and you have a amount of time to work on it, and to take it home with you and then work on it. And so that's something that you should be aware of as well, kind of being ready to kind of deal with those and being kind of aware of what might come up for certain jobs. So for example, if you're applying to somewhere where you're going to be doing back-end stuff, kind of be aware of kind of maybe what framework they use and kind of how to use it so you can work on that in a kind of efficient and kind of clean way. Difficult questions as far as that goes. What was the most difficult question? I got one a little while ago. What's the number one thing you're afraid of coming into a new position like this? Which was quite difficult.
What did you say?
I said it's something I hadn't encountered during my kind of interview practice. So I had to kind of make some. I had to kind of speak off the cuff for this one. I said I said one of the things I was kind of mainly concerned with was not necessarily being completely out of my depth, but kind of being maybe breaking something or kind of doing some sort of irreparable damage to some sort of code base or something like that, right? Or maybe allowing some information to kind of be leaked or something like that, right? Kind of some really, really big kind of problem that I'd cause perhaps if I was kind of inexperienced, that maybe would cause kind of like a big problem at the company I was working for. And so thankfully I was reassured that those kind of things aren't really common. Those kind of things, I mean, new people make mistakes all the time, but usually kind of the mistakes you're allowed to make are kind of usually fairly small. And so, I think it's good to be aware that if you are working as a kind of fairly inexperienced engineer in a new company, they're rarely going to allow you to make mistakes that kind of have huge consequences. So there's no need to kind of feel like you're out of your depth or something like that. It's okay to kind of go in and to kind of use what you've got and kind of maybe do the best you can, and don't be afraid of breaking things too much because you won't be allowed to.
I think that's a great answer. And like a question like that, it's not so much the details of exactly how you answer it, it's just showing your values in the question and the answer. So like you care about doing good work, you care about not making mistakes and doing things properly, and your concerns are things like that. So I think that kind of answer is great. It's, I don't know what I would say if someone asked me that question. On the spot, with no preparation, I'm not sure I'd give as good answer as that.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough one.
Yeah, so you say you didn't get so many programming puzzle type questions. I mean, some companies use them, some companies don't. It really depends. These days, if you search online, you can find out what type of questions a company asks. And often the company will just tell you what their interview process is. They'll say, look, we're going to do 3 interviews, one like this, one like this, one like this. You know, they're not going to tell you the questions, but they'll give you a lot of info that can help you prepare. Because they don't want to just like, you know, throw you into the middle of a completely random interview that you've never thought about before, because it's a waste of everyone's time, right?
Yeah, of course. You've got to remember they want you to be a good candidate, right?
Right.
They want to kind of be both. It's kind of, they want you to kind of win, right? They want you to kind of be a successful candidate. They want you to be as good as you can be, and so they can hire you and they can have a good candidate working for them. And so kind of they're rooting for you as much as you're rooting for yourself, right? You've got to remember that everyone kind of wants to succeed, and kind of it's okay to go in there and to kind of just do your best, because everyone kind of just wants you to do your best out there. So.
And so speaking about job interviews from another perspective, there's also the chance of you as a candidate to find out more about the company and decide where you want to work. Especially, you know, if you're doing really good, you do like 5-6 interviews, you might get different offers. You've got to choose one company. So were there any things you did or questions you asked which helped you learn more about the companies? And were there any companies where you thought maybe, oh, I don't want to work there because of this, or any kind of negative signal like that?
So kind of when asking questions about to kind of people about the companies, there were some good opportunities to ask some of the kind of mid-level staff in some companies that I interviewed for, kind of what they tend to do, or kind of what new employees tend to do, kind of their policy on kind of working hours and overtime or things like that, and also kind of what they enjoy about working at the company. If you get a kind of swift response about what someone enjoys about their company, then it's a good sign that it's kind of coming from the heart. It's something that's true, something that they really feel about that company. And so kind of asking, it's a bit of a strange question to ask, kind of unprompted, but kind of what do you like about working here? Or what's one of the best things about working here? Or something like that. I guess it's a completely fair question to ask as someone kind of going to a company for an interview or something like that. And it's good to see how people answer, because of course different people have different values, different people have different reasons why they'll enjoy it, and often kind of they'll give you kind of a good insight into kind of what the company's like. So that was one question I got a couple of really good answers from.
Yeah, that's a great tip. One thing I think is really useful to ask, and I think this can apply to many questions, is say you want to find out about how a company handles like a really big servers down, servers on fire, everything's going wrong kind of situation. If you ask about it what do you do when the server goes down? It's very generic, and I think another way to rephrase a question like that is like, oh, tell me about the last time the server went down. It doesn't have to be that particular question, but like, tell me about the last time there was an issue with the data. Tell me about the last time this happened, and focus on like one particular time, because then it's not that they're going to lie to you, but they cherry pick examples. But if you say like, oh, tell me about the last time, most people will say, oh, last week this happened and we did it like this, and then we followed up like this, and they'll give you kind of specific things that they actually did, rather than just kind of what they're supposed to do when it really happens. So that can help.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something you encounter on the other side as well. You get a lot of kind of tell me about a time when this happened, or tell me what you do in this situation, kind of questions, kind of when you're interviewing for companies. And so it's good to maybe be aware of those types of questions, and if possible, kind of have some kind of examples ready to go for all those kind of standard tell me about questions. Tell me about a time when something went wrong, or tell me about a time when someone got angry with you, or something, that's kind of bad relation at work or something like that. It's good to kind of think ahead about what to expect with those. And it's good to have concrete examples to back up things that you've done as well, if that comes up in an interview. So it's always good to have concrete examples.
Cool. So that's kind of all the stuff I wanted to ask about the study and the job interview. But is there anything else that you think I should have asked you that I haven't said?
And so let's think about that for a second. So
take your time.
Let's see. I think one important thing that we may have touched on a little bit is kind of finding sources of motivation. I think definitely to begin with, before you kind of get stuck in, and also kind of at sticking points throughout kind of your coding journey. Sometimes it's possible to kind of have a dip in motivation or kind of a lack of motivation or those kinds
Absolutely.
of things. And so I think it's good to have kind of a system to kind of work through that, or kind of a way to work through that, or just maybe a project that you really like working on that you can use to kind of maybe wind down or something like that. And so if you spend a hard day working on something that you don't particularly like so much, maybe you can spend the next day or a couple of hours after, or perhaps, or some time winding down on a project that you really, really want to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, kind of definitely finding personal techniques to help you keep motivated. That'll be different for different people, but kind of having specific coding problems that kind of you enjoy working on was definitely something that kind of worked for me when I had lacking of motivation. Kind of thinking like, maybe I can do a couple of hours of this really important thing, and I can spend a couple of hours brushing on this thing I really want to do. And so kind of, yeah, keeping motivation high, kind of especially when you're just treading into a new field, there's a lot of reasons to kind of become demotivated, I think, at that stage, because kind of you're a bit out of your depth in some ways.
Yeah.
And having ways to kind of keep that motivation, to kind of keep that excitement and kind of spirit for kind of learning a new thing, definitely kind of helps over kind of long stretches of learning to code.
Yeah, absolutely great point. Like, motivation cannot be underestimated. So right now there's so many free resources. The information is not the problem a lot of the time. And there are things like coding boot camps. And some people say, oh, coding boot camp, you should never, you can get the information for free. But coding boot camps for some people, I think, are a really good fit, because they help with the motivation, they help them keep doing it, the commitment, which for some people they don't need it. You didn't go to a coding boot camp, but some people that could be a really good choice depending on your situation. So like, find ways to motivate, like projects you like, people you enjoy working with, team up with someone, mentorship, co-working spaces, places like the Engineer Cafe, online groups. There's so many ways to do that, but yeah, be aware that motivation's gonna take a dip over this kind of months and months and months of progress, and it is progress. So try and think about what you're going to do when you lose a bit of motivation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to underscore as well, it is going to take time. There is going to be progress. There's going to be times when you progress very quickly on something. There are going to be times when maybe you have a little bit less progress on something. But it's going to take a long time. It's going to take months kind of to work up these skills. And so kind of having that kind of work life down, that kind of work schedule, kind of here's where I work, or here's what I work on, or here's kind of where I get my materials to work on. I think coding boot camps are a good way to provide that, because it's kind of all laid out for you. But of course, I think it's possible, definitely, as I demonstrated, I guess, to kind of do that by yourself. But it's kind of always good to kind of have that plan to kind of, here's where I go to work if I'm maybe lacking a bit of motivation. Or maybe here's where I go to work on this day of the week, and here's what I'm going to do. Kind of just to kind of take as much kind of as much pressure off your kind of self-motivation as possible, and get as much down to kind of routine as possible. Kind of make it a nice routine. Kind of don't go too hard on yourself all of the time. Kind of remember to take breaks and to kind of maybe code in maybe other spaces. You can code at home sometimes, you can code in the cafe sometimes, in the park, kind of wherever you like, right? But kind of try to get that schedule, that kind of system for how you're going to do this down. I think that's something very, very important to get kind of nailed down early on. Kind of, I'm going to spend this amount of time during the day at this place doing this kind of thing, and I'm going to work on this thing first, and then kind of go through this kind of series of things. I think a lot of sites, Odin Project being one, Code Academy being one, I think Free Code Camp has things like that too, kind of give you kind of a framework to work through. But it's definitely good to kind of get those down first, so you end up spending less time spinning your wheels and going off in different directions.
Absolutely. Great. I think we'll round it up there. I think that was a really nice little interview, lots of great information in there. So yeah, thanks so much for coming. I wish you all the best of luck with your new job.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. See you back in a couple of years when you'll be teaching something.
Excellent, I'll be glad to do it.